Hello, I'm Lee Baker, co-president of Atheist United locally and co-president of the national organization Atheist Alliance. Atheists United had the honor of hosting the first annual National Atheist Alliance convention recently in Los Angeles. One of the issues we addressed was religion in public school. Teaching about religion as to its influence on human history, including the role and influence of atheists and other freethinkers, paralleling religious history, is the appropriate way to deal with this subject in curriculum. No one explains that better than Dr. Gerald LaRue. Mr. Jack Massen, founder of Atheist Alliance, introduced Dr. LaRue at the convention.
This last part of the program is about objectivity, accuracy, and balance in teaching about religion, for which there is a California corporation, which I organized, and it goes under an acronym name O.A.B.I.T.A.R. It is a coalition of 3 national organizations at the present time: the American Humanist Association, CODESH, the Council for Democratic and Secular Humanism, and this Atheist Alliance. We expect more organizations to be invited and to accept soon. I wrote an article about this O.A.B.I.T.A.R. in the second issue of Secular Nation, and those of you who are subscribers have that article. Perhaps you have read it. If you are not subscribers, and I'm afraid a number of you here are not subscribers to Secular Nation, I'm maintaining the mailing list now as a treasurer of Atheist Alliance, you have not seen that article. I made reprints of it, and I will deliver a number of copies of those reprints to the book room as quickly as possible after this luncheon is over. So you will find that summary article about the purposes of O.A.B.I.T.A.R. But now we will hear from the man who has written the book, which provides the historical and intellectual foundation for O.A.B.I.T.A.R., for objectivity, accuracy, and balance in teaching about religion. Most of us here acquire a series of entries in what we call a resume, but he has a much more important document called a curriculum vitae, and it's so long that he had to acquire another computer large enough for capacity to hold all the entries. Very briefly, he graduated from University of Alberta, Canada, being a Canadian by birth. Bachelor of Arts in 43, Bachelor of Divinity in 47. And he was a minister in various churches, small churches in Canada and the U.S. Until 1953, at least in 1953, acquired a Doctor of Divinity from Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley. And further formal education, you might say, followed with a doctoral fellowship, postdoctoral fellowship in 1967 from Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem. He has told me that he was something of a doubter as he went through divinity school, and one of his professors said, well, get out and be a minister and explore your doubts, and apparently the doubts grew. I've had much relationship with him, intense relationship, but not too much time to talk about his personal life. But he must have had a growing skepticism about which he's written a book, and that led him to teaching at, he thinks it's about 1959 that he began teaching at the University of Southern California. He participated in or led archaeological expeditions to Jordan and Israel in 64, 66, and 67. In 69, he established the Gerald LaRue Archaeological Collection and the Archaeological Research Center at the University of Southern California. At 1981, he retired as Emeritus Professor of Biblical History and Archaeology at USC, but since '81, he's been Adjunct Professor of Gerontology at the Andrews Center at USC, and he continues to teach long after normal retirement age. Another emeritus in his record is that he is the first president of the National Hemlock Society, and currently its President Emeritus. In 1989, he was chosen American Humanist Association's Humanist of the Year. Last weekend, he flew to Harvard for a quick trip to advise the Harvard humanists on how to be more humanistic. And he gets invitations. He's been all over. That's these many entries in his long curriculum vitae. He was invited to Seoul, Korea last August to give a lecture on humanism, and they invited him back. He's going back next August. And so now I present to you a man who, since I first followed him in a breakfast line in November of 1991 at a Free Inquiry conference in Boston, a very happy happenstance for me, has become one of the most rewarding personal experiences and contacts that I've had in my fairly long life. I present to you Gerald A. LaRue.
I thought I would start with a little story. The setting is Oral Roberts University. It is graduation time. The key speaker is Billy Graham, and Oral Roberts, with great pride, introduces him. And as Dr. Graham comes up to the podium and is about to start speaking, the graduating class all stand up, and they begin to chant, "Let Bubba graduate, let Bubba graduate." And they go on with this, and finally Billy Graham holds up his hands and said, I don't know what's going on, but is Bubba here? And the young man, nicely dressed, stood up, and he said, "Come up here, son, I want to talk to you for a moment." So the young man went up, and Billy Graham said, "You know, God has answers for all problems. You look like an intelligent young man. I don't know what yours is, but let me ask you, what's 9 times 9? And the young man said, 81. And he said, "Well, why don't you go and sit down, and after I finish speaking, we'll get together." So the young man went to sit down, and Billy Graham went back to start his speech, and the graduating class rose up again and said, "Give Bubba another chance. Give Bubba another chance." You can use that with any rival university you want, UCLA or whatever. The title of my talk is Freethought Across the Centuries, and it's taken from the title of a book that I've just completed for O.A.B.I.T.A.R, O.A.B.I.T.A.R, which you've got the basis for that, Objectivity, Accuracy, and Balance in Teaching about Religion. And Jack Massen founded that program, as he's founded a number of other things that are of interest to us all. What has happened is this. In our examination of school textbooks used in history classes, social study classes in grades 7, 8, and 9, particularly here in California, we found that the major religions of the world are discussed. And there can be no argument that in any study of history, the role of religion properly has a place. It's part of social evolution. What is of concern to us was the presentation of these religions, which followed the traditional patterns as taught within the church or within the literature of the church. That is to say, in the section on the account of the early Israelites, for example, Genesis mythology and Genesis legendary accounts are presented without any challenge as to their factuality. For example, the Exodus is discussed as it is presented in the Bible. Students are not encouraged to use critical thinking, challenging the idea that over 1 million complaining Hebrews could wander for 40 years in the desert being miraculously fed by their God. The presentation of modern Jewish ritual is accurate. When they get into the history of the kings of Israel, it's accurate. But this other material stands alongside of the sequence of events that we can document historically. The Jesus story is similarly presented. Students are informed that an angel told Mary she was pregnant and gave her the name for the child. On the other hand, the history of the spread of Christianity is told in a rather factual manner. What is omitted is the cultural context in which Christianity was born. Students are not told that in the Greco-Roman world, gods regularly impregnated virgins, that miracle healers abounded, performing many of the same kinds of healings that were attributed to Jesus. They are not informed about the mystery cults of ancient Greece and the fact that as Christianity began to develop, it became a mystery religion, incorporating many aspects of the cults of its time. What is also missing is the challenge to faith positions made by critical thinkers throughout history. And in every cultural setting where a religion is born, there have been those who have raised challenges and questions. None of this is presented. The critics often produced dramatic changes within a given religion and sometimes broke off and developed another cult of their own. Now, in this book, which, as I said, was written for O.A.B.I.T.A.R, we have titled Freethought Across the Centuries, I have attempted to provide a reader, the teacher, I would hope, and interested parents with information that sets each religion within a cultural context. I have asked, how did this particular culture develop? What can we learn of the development of this culture from archaeological research, from the study of the history of religions, from comparative religious studies, from philosophy, from literature, from science? And the result is an analysis within each section of the book of the birth of a belief in gods, the recognition of God stories or myths, the recognition that these are human concoctions, that the laws and the moral prescriptions come not from God, but are echoes of what the humans have thought. They project it into God so they can take it back for themselves, and so that the voices of the gods are no more than human voices. All of this is in the book that we have produced. Furthermore, through the examination of cultural literature, it becomes clear that throughout the world and throughout history, we have the presence of skeptics whose critical inquiries have tended to be ignored, squelched, silenced in the textbooks and in the modern study of religion. So we begin our book with a set of definitions of the many forms of free thought that leads us from atheists and agnostics through igtheists. That's a good one. Igtheists. This is a Paul Kurt's creation. It says to the theist, I'm ignorant of what you're talking about. It makes no sense. I like that one. Through rationalists and right up through to skeptics. We explain the basis for rational skepticism. We consider the importance of the separation of church and state, a theme that surfaces over and over again throughout the book. And as a consequence, free thought across the ages tends to be rather thick, I think it's going to be, Jack. 500 pages, but we think it's packed with important, interesting, and we hope fascinating information. Let me give you an example. Consider for a moment the thoughtful insight of a 16th century Inca, Topa Yupanqui, whose priests and religious dogma told him that the sun was a god. Listen to what he said. Many say that the sun lives and that he is the maker of all things. Surely he who makes things assists in its creation. But many things are made when the sun is absent. Good thought. Therefore he cannot be the maker of all things. And it may be concluded that he does not live, because he makes so many revolutions and yet is not tired. If he was a living thing, he would be tired as we get tired. And if he was free, he would visit other parts of the heaven, which he never reaches. He's like a tethered beast that always makes the same round, or it's like a dart that goes where it is sent and not where it wishes. Now, consider the student reading the way in which this 16th century Inca approached the claims of faith and how that can stimulate within the student's mind. Maybe it's not illegal, illicit, improper to ask these kind of questions. Here indeed was a free thinker, And it seems to me that out of the introduction of thoughts of men and women like the 16th century Inca, we will encourage students to exercise their own reasoning powers and challenge modern assumptions that rest solely on blind, unquestioning faith. In Egypt, archaeologists find the mummified bodies of humans and animals which were preserved in the hope of some form of reanimation in a future life. It's like a belief that we have presently in our own society where we cryonically preserve bodies and heads that are going to be animated, cloned, reconstituted in some wondrous future. One of my students has said ancient Egyptian mummies have been replaced by modern corpsicles. How do you like that one? Now, just as there are those who today question the claims of cryonic suspension, there were in ancient Egypt those who raised questions about the mummification of people for an afterlife. Listen to the words of a harpist. He was brought in to entertain people during a banquet. He was a realist, and he introduces logic and rational thinking into the song he sings. He knew about the theory of the afterlife, but listen. He says, no one ever returned from there to tell us about their conditions, to tell us about their needs, or to comfort our hearts, until we have gone where they have gone. Then he introduces, having introduced this element of uncertainty, he goes on to tell the guests, how do you live with this kind of uncertainty in the future? Follow your wishes, he says, as long as you live. Put myrrh on your head, dress in fine linen, anoint yourself with perfumes fit for a god. Add to the joys you have, and don't be faint-hearted. Follow your desires and be good to yourself. Spend days in happiness and don't weary of it. Look, no one can take his goods with him, and look, no one who has departed ever returns. Now, his comments can serve to prompt similar queries in the minds of students about claims of the afterlife in modern theology. Now, in Mesopotamia, there was a similar quest for immortality. We have the story of Gilgamesh, an ancient king of the city of Uruk, and he wanted to acquire eternal life. His best friend, with whom he was doing all sorts of adventures, died in his arms, and he suddenly realized that death was going to come to him too. So he decided to go to the edge of the flat world, enter the place of the immortals, and discuss with an ancestor named Utnapishtim, who was granted by the gods eternal life. On his journey, he paused at a wayside inn for refreshments, and the barmaid there gave him some very practical advice. Listen to what she said. Gilgamesh, where are you running? You're not going to find the immortal life you're seeking. When the gods created humankind, they ordained death for humans and kept immortality for themselves. So make merry day and night. Make every day a day of joy. Dance, play, day and night. Well, she goes on, wear beautiful clothes. Bathe your head. Refresh yourself with water. Cherish the little child who takes your hand. Let your wife rejoice in your manhood, for this is the fate or the future of mankind. Now, she's not arguing about the existence of gods, but she does present a humanistic response, an atheistic response to life. If you can't know about the future, live now. And like the atheist, her argument says that this is what counts, that this life is what counts, not some imaginary life to come. Interestingly enough, the same point of view appears in the Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes, where Koheleth, and the word means teacher, not preacher, an educator who opens his writings with the cry of chabel, which means meaninglessness. The King James Version calls it vanity or that which is in vain. And life is meaningless. There is no ultimate meaning. He doesn't deny the existence of God, but he does deny that humans have any real understanding about that God. Human life without ultimate meaning has therefore only the meaning we give to it now. He's not quite an atheist, but he's close, And listen to what he says. I have seen the God-given tasks with which men busy themselves, and that God has made each happening acceptable for its time, and also that although he has put in men's minds the quest for that which is hidden, man cannot comprehend what God has been doing from the start to finish. What does one do in the light of this finality? And his response is that, like that given to Gilgamesh by the barmaid, like that of the Egyptian harpist. So, he says, do what we've done here. Go eat your bread with enjoyment and drink your wine with pleasure. We didn't get that, but that's all right. Inasmuch as God has already accepted what you do. Let your garments be white, and let there be no lack of oil for your head. Enjoy life with the woman you love all the days of your meaningless life that God has granted you, the meaningless life that God has granted you under the sun. For this is your compensation for your work and your toil in the world. Whatever your hand undertakes to do, do it with your might. For there is neither work, nor thought, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, for which you are bound. Over and over again, throughout our book, attention is called to the expressions and the thinking of those who, within the various faith systems, within authoritative literature, or despite authoritative literature, have expressed doubts and humanistic concerns. These free thinkers have been there all along, all through history, in every religion, but they're ignored in these school classes that teach about religion. That's one feature of our book. A second feature is this. We recognize, under the broad interpretation of what is free thought, we recognize that every break within a traditional religion is an element of contains an element of independent thinking. When Buddha broke from the multi-god religion of Hinduism, he acted as a free and independent thinker. He tried the religion. You tried being a Greek priest, I tried being a Protestant minister, and he broke. He proposed something completely different. He is supposed to have said, Jesus himself is also a free thinker. He broke with traditional Judaism. And remember, in Judaism, a son followed his father's occupation. No, he wanders off, ignores his family. And he speaks with authority. He says, you have heard of old time, but I say to you. Complete deviation. Independent thinking within the context of traditional Judaism, perhaps, but also deviation in terms of social and religious orientation. So that also when Martin Luther substituted a paper authority, the Bible, for a physical authority, the Pope, he was acting as an independent critical thinker. And when Madison and Jefferson, reflecting on the dangers of joining religion and state, made their comments, they also acted as free thinkers. And so on and on it goes, right down to those of us who are gathered here today. Now, within this book, we're not arguing faith positions. We're not challenging the impact of religion on culture. We accept the legitimacy of teaching about the ways in which Judaism and Christianity and Islam and Buddhism and Hinduism and Shinto have impacted, each in its own way, on human history. What we do is this. We go within those traditions and we point out that within ancient Hinduism there were atheists who were still called Hindus. We point out that free thinkers produced Taoism and Confucianism, that the caste system and the restrictive bonds that it places on human beings is being attacked presently by atheistic societies and humanistic organizations within India, that the burdens, as you pointed out, that are placed on women are being challenged by the ways in which free thinkers are opposing traditional supporters of various faiths. We're not denying the importance of teaching about religion in the public schools. The recognition of the roles that religion has played belongs in the study of human social development. Nor are we arguing that students must be taught atheism as a special subject within the school system. We are calling for the recognition of the presence of free thinkers, of the contributions of free thinkers, in the hope that within the student body, critical thinking will be encouraged and will be stimulated. We believe that critical thinking should include challenges from thoughtful students to the claims presented in the traditional religions. Nor can it be argued that we are providing, as some have suggested, a revisionist theory of history. The facts are that the free thought elements have been there all along. All they need now is present recognition. Now, there's another thing that, through Jack Massen and his maneuvering, we are hoping to produce free thought at a very reasonable cost to people like those of us who are not millionaires. And the concern here is not with profit. That's not what we're doing this for. But with making available to teachers, educators in the public schools, to counselors, to parents, to intelligent readers like yourselves, information that will encourage teaching about non-belief as well as about belief in the public school educational programs. The central faiths are presented uncritically in the present system. We suggest that as each faith system developed, along with that development, there were critical thinkers and skeptics who challenged aspects of that faith. Their presence needs recognition. And further, we suggest that among those who have made significant contributions to human welfare, human growth, human well-being, there are non-believers, there are skeptics, there are atheists, they are free thinkers, and their presence needs recognition. Free thought across the centuries is, therefore, more than a title for a book. It's a reality whose presence calls for recognition. And isn't that what we're all about here? Thank you.
If you'd like to know more about Atheists United and meet some of us in person, come to one of our open meetings. We meet the fourth Sunday each month at Marina del Rey. Write or call us for a complimentary newsletter with directions and lots of other news of interest. Atheists United, Post Office Box 8464, Universal City, California 91618, 8464, or call us at 818-785-1743.